Which Buccaneer has the most to prove this season? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Father's Day edition of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you at least 3 times a week throughout the month of June, along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Mike Evans sounds off about the receivers on this team, and Chris Godwin makes a change. That's coming up in a little bit, but we're kicking today off with an article from PFF about the 10 players in the NFL with the most to prove this season. So they name guys like Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, but they do also mention one player from the Bucs who certainly had a down year last season, and that is Antoine Winfield Jr. Zoltan Boudet, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but Zoltan Boudet, the author of the column, said, quote, "The Buccaneers made Antoine Winfield Jr. not only the highest paid safety in the NFL, but also the highest paid defensive back last offseason. The Minnesota alumnus was coming off a season in which he earned a 90.7 PFF overall grade, which led all safeties. He also ranked among the top 10 safeties in PFF overall grade in both of the seasons leading up to his new deal. Between 2021 and 2023, Winfield earned a 92.0 PFF overall grade, which led 93 qualifying safeties over that span. His 3,077 snaps across 3 seasons were the 13th most among safeties. However, 2024 was Winfield's worst season to date in all regards. He played a career-low 601 snaps due to multiple injuries. Even when he was on the field, he did not play like his usual self. His 57.8 PFF overall grade was the lowest of his career, in line with his 50.8 PFF coverage grade and his 125.1 passer rating allowed in coverage. 1 year after his historic contract extension, Winfield is looking to prove that he is still among the best safeties in the NFL." End quote. Antoine was the reason that the Bucs won some of the games that they did in 2023, and the contract he was given was well-deserved for sure. But it's really hard to argue with the assessment that he needs to have drastic improvement over last season. And Boudet touched on it, saying that Winfield was dealing with multiple injuries last season. He got hurt in the final snap of the Week 1 game against the Commanders, and from there, he never played a game fully healthy again the rest of the 2024 season. So that's certainly a big factor. However, there should be plenty of confidence that he can return to his 2023 form this year, rather than looking at what he did in 2024 as a sign of things to come. Beyond the injuries that Winfield suffered, you also have to look at the injuries around him. Jordan Whitehead missed time. Christian Izien missed time. Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum, Tyke Smith, they all missed time. He was back there with Kayvon Merriweather and Ryan Neal, who they signed off the street to come help. They brought back Mike Edwards, who immediately got hurt. The rest of the secondary was Tavier Thomas and Tyreek Funderburk at times. That isn't exactly a unit that allows Antoine to play the way that he has played in Todd Bowles' defense over the years that freed him up to have the season that he did in 2023. Then you look at the pass rush, or lack thereof, and of course you all understand how important the pass rush is for the secondary to be able to make plays. If the guys up front aren't getting pressure and the guys in the secondary are left on islands for extended periods of time, then there's only so much that they can do. So when you look at the landscape of the Buccaneers defense as a whole last season, it starts to make sense why Antoine was having the problems that he was. Now, he was still making plays, just not at the clip that he did in 2023. He had a huge play that he got completely screwed on against Kyle Pitts and the Falcons. He had a scoop and score against the Saints, but with that said, it was still by far his worst statistical season. 9 games played, that's a career low. 0 interceptions, 0 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, 2 sacks, and just 60 tackles. That was his first season without a forced fumble or an interception in his career. It tied a career low for sacks, a career low in tackles. Only had 2 tackles for loss, which was the worst since his rookie season. Career low in passes defense. He just was not himself. You don't have a drop-off from defensive player of the year candidate to what he was last year just because of focus or loss of drive or loss of killer mentality. There were extenuating circumstances that played into it, whether that was directly or indirectly. So when you take a look at what the Bucs defense should look like this year, you start to see the pieces there around him that will allow him to play more freely and get back to that monster that he was in 2023. Tyke back there at safety with them. The additions of Parrish and Morrison in the secondary to go along with McCollum and Dean. The addition of Hassan Reddick to the edge rushers, replacing KJ Britt with Servassier Dennis and or Anthony Walker. You have seen the Bucs upgrade, or at least attempt to upgrade, every single level of the defense in at least some way this season. That's what's going to allow Antoine to start to get back to who he was, where he was getting over 80 tackles a season, multiple sacks, multiple passes defense, multiple takeaways at all 3 levels of the defense. And I know last year, some people turned on Antoine. I know that because they would message me about him and how he's overpaid, overrated, overhyped, and I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Antoine is one of the best in the game, but let this be the perfect example of why football isn't like other sports. You cannot have one guy on either side of the ball do everything and the team have success. In the NBA, you can have one guy carry your team to the playoffs. LeBron, as much as I don't care for him, did it for years with the Cavs. You may not win a championship, but you can at least make the playoffs with basically one guy. In hockey, you can have a goalie that is so good that it masks the deficiencies in front of him. In baseball, you can have a pitcher that is so dominant that the team only needs to scrape together 1 or 2 runs to win a game. In football, all 11 guys have to be at their best all the time or the entire thing falls apart. It just takes one guy being out of position, one guy not knowing their assignment, one guy running the wrong route, one guy misreading the play at the line of scrimmage before the snap, and the entire thing is shot. That's a lot of what Antoine and Levante and Vea were dealing with last year. Those guys could only do so much when the rest of the defense was failing, when the edge rushers were not getting the quarterback, when the practice squad corners had to be called up in order to start because of injuries, when KJ or JJ couldn't cover anyone out of the backfield or a tight end to save their lives. You cannot pin it all on one guy because everyone on the field has to make sure that they're doing their job while trusting the rest of the players to do their jobs. So while I agree that Antoine needs to prove that he's better than what he showed us last season, I don't think this is a situation where people are questioning his talent, his IQ, his motivation. Antoine isn't the type of guy that gets his bag and then starts to loaf or checks out because he already got paid. He wants to get back to a Super Bowl. He wants to win another one, but he can't be the player that Bucs fans fell in love with or the player that earned the biggest defensive back contract in NFL history if the rest of the team isn't doing their jobs. You are not winning 1 versus 11. That's just not how it works. So I like that he's on this list. I like that there's that level of expectation for him that just wasn't met and he's being challenged on it. And I certainly believe that he can meet and exceed those expectations this season if the entire defense doesn't end up as a mash unit again. Mike Evans is one excited dude. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and I can attest to that. This year's matchups are already delivering, and if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Game Time is a total game changer. Game Time makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. You're going to find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. And with Game Time guarantee, your tickets are 100% authentic and will arrive on time. You always get the best price with fees included, so what you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So I said about a week or so ago that this Bucs receiver room is the best in the NFL, and it wasn't particularly close. Now, I was mocked and dragged and called unk on TikTok quite a bit, but no one could actually offer a legitimate alternative or a legitimate counter to that claim. Top to bottom, this is the best receiver room in the league. And apparently, Mike Evans believes that it's the best one he's ever been part of. After minicamp last week, Evans spoke to the media and was asked about the additions of Ibuka and Tez Johnson, and he said, quote, "I know I say it a lot, but this might be the best receiving room I've ever been a part of. I say it every year, but we always get great players coming in, so that's been very fortunate for me in my career to be around a lot of great young players, and they've added to the room tremendously. They're already very polished already. Emeka has really strong hands, super smart. Tez has speed and quickness." Think about that for a minute. Think about the best receiver room that Evans has ever been part of. Going back, you look at some of the receivers that Evans has played with: Vincent Jackson, Deshaun Jackson, Godwin, of course. In 2017 and 2018, it was Evans, Deshaun, and Godwin. In 2020 and 2021, it was Evans, Godwin, Antonio Brown, Scotty Miller. You could throw Gronk in there because he was basically a receiver, but he wasn't technically part of the receiver room. And I mean, before AB lost his mind, that was a crazy talented group. You had Tyler Johnson out there making plays as part of that receiver room. You had Julio Jones in the Buccaneers receiving room for a year. Granted, he ended up having to deal with some injuries, and that was unfortunate. But when he was on the field, he was effective. But now, this group, this is wild. Evans, Godwin, McMillan, Ibuka, Tez. Then you got Sterling Shepard, Trey Palmer, Rakim Jarrett, Cam Johnson. This is an elite collection of talent. And what boggles my mind is that not all of these guys are going to make the team. We're going to have plenty of discussions about that once training camp rolls around, but the battle to be the last one or two receivers on the roster is going to be absolutely epic. It's the number 2 battle for me outside of the battle within the secondary and all those corners. The Bucs have 4 guys that can be a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2 on at least half the teams in the NFL. There were multiple teams trying to make Godwin their wide receiver 1, and he turned them down to stay in Tampa. Ibuka would have been a wide receiver 2 at minimum for the teams that were trying to move up to draft him. The Rams were trying to move up and get him. The Packers wanted him. So having him as a 4th option is absolutely crazy. Evans isn't wrong here. He's played with multiple Hall of Fame caliber receivers. He's a Hall of Fame receiver. But to look around him and to see these guys where any one of them can take over a game at any point has to give him a lot of confidence heading into this season. And look, Evans is a guy that has seen a lot of rookie receivers come through here. Some made it, some didn't. But saying that they're already polished receivers is an overlooked line that's actually a massive compliment and should give Bucs fans a huge amount of confidence in what the abilities are of these receivers. Evans knows he's going to get his. Everyone in that building wants to make sure that he gets his 1,000. Even Jerry Rice himself is rooting for Evans to get the record-breaking 12th season of 1,000 yards. But the talent around him is so impressive and so good that it might actually make getting 1,000 yards this year even easier. Last year was definitely the toughest, and it took until the final play of the final game after he missed time and the Bucs didn't have Godwin to take the attention of the defense. Then you have McMillan step up, and things started to open up for Evans. Teams couldn't fully focus all their efforts on Evans because Sterling Shepard was beating him. Jalen McMillan was beating him. Cade Otton was beating him. Then you had Payne Durham and Devin Culp getting their opportunities. But now Evans gets Godwin back. You add Emeka Egbuka into the mix. Teams are going to force Egbuka, Tez, and McMillan to an extent to prove that they can be those dudes before they stop doubling Evans. But once those guys start making defenses pay and the defenses have to alter their approach and leave Mike one-on-one with corners, that's when he is going to absolutely dominate the way we know Mike Evans can dominate. It's just like what I said about Antoine at the top of the show. All these guys have to do their job in order for the offense to succeed. They have to do everything right and trust that their teammates are going to do everything right. So having a receiving core like this, where any one of them can go off for 102 touchdowns in any game, is going to make the offense incredible to watch. But if Egbuka and Tez and McMillan are not handling their business, then it's all for naught. It's all a whole lot of chat and a lot of talk from people like me when those guys aren't doing their jobs. It'll look horrendously similar to the days when it was like Mike Evans, Adam Humphries, and Russell Shepard as the receivers. And this offense won't be anywhere close to as dangerous as we all believe it can be. It's not going to be anywhere close to as dangerous as that preseason prediction that they're going to be the number 2 scoring offense in the NFL. You have Evans, you have Godwin, you know what they're going to do. But like Evan has said on this show, Godwin's probably going to be brought along slowly. So you have to have Egbuka step up and fill those shoes, fill that role to be the legitimate threat out of the slot where both he and Godwin thrive. And Egbuka's that dude that can line up on the outside and he can thrive there. And I'll tell you this, as much as I do not want to watch Ohio State games, I am really excited to jump into watching Egbuka for my rookie film series that's coming up on this show. And I feature my film study on all of the Bucs rookie class. But, Evans, just another endorsement for how good this, not only this wide receiver room is, but how dangerous this offense can truly be. Some final thoughts in honor of Father's Day. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Father's Day edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And seeing how this is being released on Father's Day, I wanted to take a moment to highlight a few things. First, a change that is being made by Chris Godwin. Now, a lot of you may have seen this already, but if not, Chris Godwin is adding Junior to his nameplate this season in honor of his late father, Rod Christopher Godwin Sr. Godwin said in a statement, quote, "As a kid, I enjoyed an amazing relationship with my dad, Rod Christopher Godwin Sr. From youth football through high school, I always knew that he was there because I would hear him yelling in support of his son. He instilled in me early that I could achieve anything I wanted if I worked hard enough and treated people with respect. I always appreciated and valued the immeasurable impact he had on my life, and I made sure to let him know that every day, not just on Father's Day. I lost my pops in January of 2024, and Father's Day last year was a time of reflection and introspection. This year, Father's Day represents a full circle moment in my life journey as I get to celebrate being a first-time dad with my son, Ace. Fatherhood has already been an unbelievable experience and has changed me in so many ways. I can only hope that Ace feels the same way about me as I do about my dad. As a professional athlete, you are always recognized for the name on the front of your jersey, but I also play for the name that's printed on the back. That's why I've chosen to add Junior to my name in honor of the man who gave so unselfishly of himself to others and helped mold me into who I am today. Love you, Pops. End quote. If you'll all indulge me, I'd like to take a minute to talk about why I'm here. And I'm going to apologize now in case I get emotional, but I can pretty much guarantee that I will. But I get asked a lot about a guy who has lived in Ohio his entire life, how he, wound up following the Bucs and doing what I do. It's all because of my dad. As a kid, I watched my dad root for the Bucs, and as all little boys do, I wanted to emulate him. So I started rooting for them too and following them and relishing the opportunities they were actually on television in southwestern Ohio. But something else that I watched my dad do was pore over a word processor. We didn't have a computer at the time, but he would pore over a word processor night after night after night for years as he wrote a book. It was a children's poetry book, and it was his passion, his dream to have that published. I watched him beam while doing book readings and signings after his book hit shelves. Somebody reviewed it in our local paper and called it a perfect blend of Dr. Seuss and Shel Silverstein. It was a labor of love to see his dream come true. As I got older, I still loved sports, but I felt that I had something to offer. So what I started calling a healthy outlet for my unhealthy obsession, I started looking for opportunities to get into blogging. I started for a no-name blog for no pay to put my thoughts about sports, primarily the Buccaneers and the Red Sox, out into the world. That led me to another blog that's no longer in existence, where I met my dear friend Alan Schechter. That relationship led me to the pewter plank with Alan, where I met David Harrison. And the rest, as they say, is history. Watching my dad put his heart and soul into his passion was my inspiration. I had a passion, and while it wasn't writing a book, it was sports. And I don't think I ever truly considered covering sports a viable option when I went to school. Or I might not have studied culinary arts. I might have actually cared about the classes that I was going to in an attempt to become a sports journalist. But I knew that I could hone my craft the same way that my dad did all those years ago. So when people ask me, why do I cover the Bucs instead of the Bengals or instead of another local team, or how I got started writing about football or doing a podcast, the answer is really, really simple. He was just a boy who wanted to be like his dad. Happy Father's Day, everyone. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com or click the link in the show notes. If you don't want to be an insider, but you do want to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding Father's Day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.